And we're back for part two of the quarterfinals making the rounds episode. So let's try to get through these in an interesting enough manner. We're going to be talking about them in order, so that means that we'll be talking about the most interesting matches first. So,
Woo!
if you want to shut off, halfway through, no one will blame you. So Griffin versus Invictus Gaming. I think that this is probably going to be one of the most, to me, on paper, difficult ones to call. But that's just because if I see Invictus Gaming on one side of the rift, that is just automatically the most
IG.
difficult one to call because you need some magic divination shit to decide whether or not IG will actually win this time. What are your thoughts?
Um, I think it's a specifically interesting matchup for Griffin
Mm-hmm.
because I think a lot of the times when you look at Griffin's laners and the way that they like to play, the strongest laner, just pound for pound laner on the team, and this isn't talking about anything but sitting in lane and playing his lane opponent. Um, in my opinion, is Chovy. I think that's
Mm.
actually his strength. I'm super critical on Chovy for other things, but I think that is his primary strength on this team is that he can be such a pressure point in the mid lane. And one of the more interesting matchups with going up against IG is that Rookie is I don't want to say best when he's unlocked, but he does so much for IG outside of laning.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw that when he was able to, in the TL game, for example, as Kiana, as soon as he had that advantage from the solo kill, he is going topside. He's going bot side. He's not staying in lane. He's putting down vision to cover Ning and whatever Ning is doing. And that is how this team came up. So that particular matchup is super interesting to me. You have a really smart jungler in Tarzan going up against Ning, presumably. Presumably Ning is starting. I don't see why they wouldn't start him after their second round robin. Who is, I mean, like coin flip jungler is, I guess, how people typically refer to him as. There's the added thing of the fact that he hasn't played as much with the team lately. So
Stealing
as we
Emily
saw,
Cheese brand. I'm sorry.
I mean, I have a friend who will remain nameless who calls him frequently Walmart MLXG. So just take that
Nice.
into consideration. Yeah, it's pretty you know, apropos nickname. Um so I think that is another interesting matchup and a point in Griffin's favor, in my opinion. And then you have the way that these two teams like to play, which is I still think IG are the best when they have strong pushing lanes that make the most of the strength of their laners. And Griffin, who, and I know this is an unpopular opinion due to just raw laning prowess and mechanical talent, but I still like this team better with Sword on it. I think he knows how to absorb pressure, despite the fact that he did get picked on a lot, especially in the first round robin. People were incredibly critical of him. However, I see this team decision making, and it's not even necessarily the best decision or what you'd consider the correct decision, but having Sword on the team really does bring back that kind of 5 is 1 style that Griffin were known for even when they were coming up, where it's all about whatever decision they're making, they're moving and they're responding to that decision as all 5 players at once. And I think that was something that was missing with Doran. I think another thing that was missing with Doran is the fact that Tarzan had to adjust his pathing to cover for some of Doran's mistakes, which isn't, that's not Doran's fault. He's a new player and he's new to the team, so he's not going to have as much synergy. That's just a thing that happens. So hopefully people are not oh my gosh, Emily thinks Doran sucks, because that's not the case at all. But that's the reason why I actually like this team better with Sword, just because I think they're more consistent and they're more cohesive. The thing that most impressed me about Griffin was how they adjusted in their second round robin, especially given all of the other random crap that was going on. They not only were able to kind of like focus as a team, but they also in game made like some really specific adaptations that I thought were really smart. And I think take advantage of, again, the strength of their laners and the ability of them to split the map and the ability of them to use globals. Despite the fact that Lehens told me point blank that Shen sucks, which I thought was just like really funny. They're really comfortable playing that style, and against IG, that's a super interesting matchup because again, I think IG are strong lanes, push forward, cover whatever Ning is doing, whether it's like counter jungling or going ahead to gank lanes with your pushing lanes. And the problem with me, and I think this is just a mental block that's affecting my analysis, is that I just cannot trust IG to be consistent in any way. Even last year, I did not think they were going to win Worlds. I'm sorry. I can't trust them.
See, so I think that Griffin have to win this early. I think if Griffin don't win this early, their mid game is actually worse than IG's. So that's my opinion, and that's why I think it was difficult for G2, and why G2 actually beat them in the first round robin is if you just get to mid game and are even with Griffin, you can set up the map better in such a way that you beat them. If Griffin get an advantage of any kind, I think that they just win through that, basically through jungle. So that's generally my opinion, and I've explained my mid-game problems with Griffin so many times. Actually, so many times, so I'm probably not going to do it again. In fact, the other day, there was some alcohol and some
Was this the thing
bar
with
nuts?
Like the peanuts? Okay,
yes.
All right.
And some bar nuts
I saw pictures of this, and I did not know what was going on.
And the peanuts were minions. Just to clarify. But anyway, just to point out that I have used visual aids. I have tried to explain this as much as possible. Basically, all you have to do is deathball down mid if you're even in mid game to beat Griffin. I will say this until my dying day. Yeah. So we'll see how it goes. I actually had a really hard time on this one. I'm gonna end up going with Griffin because I really do think that there's a high chance IG can win. Like, I still don't want to call this one because I think I see the way both teams win. But I'm going to end up going with Griffin because the more I think about Ning, the more I question his ability to control the game. But I do think it's very possible for either team to win. It's like incredibly easy for either team to win. I think if Griffin gets to semifinals, they'll lose though. So
I will not be shocked if either team wins. But I also have Griffin just because, again, like I said, like a flaw or like thing with my analysis is that I will always default to the more consistent team, and in this case, I definitely think that's Griffin.
I don't even think Griffin are more consistent. Okay, I guess.
I think they're consistent in what they do.
They're really consistent in what they do, but that also means like so the really big thing. This is why IG should definitely win, though, right? Like they should definitely win on paper. And this is why I hate predicting any stupid game
I know
that involves IG is that they should definitely win on paper because I think teams with like a stronger mid jungle with a stronger top jungle should beat Griffin. Because the way that Griffin fix or cover up for their mid game mistakes is that Doran or Sword, either one, roams on priority inside lane to help to escort Tarzan through the mid lane, right? That's like a really common thing that they do. But if Doran or Sword are behind, that doesn't happen, right? And what team this year
It's really good.
in the
Getting top
world
lane advantages.
just plays by having Ning literally sit in the tri-brush in top lane and snowballing the Shy? I mean, this is why they should just objectively win, because the only way that Griffin can fix some of their mid-game mistakes is for top to be ahead. And that's why I think the Doran Sword question ends up being so important in defining this team, and when they have like fucking Chovy in the mid lane, and that's why Lahen's Shen is so important to their success, and they win so many games when Lahen's is playing Shen, is because they can snowball topside, and it's like one of the only conditions they have for snowballing topside is Lahen's playing Shen. So, honestly, IG should win this game! But I can't say that they will. Like, I just can't. It's so hard.
I was talking about Ashley earlier, and she said about this with Ashley earlier, and she said something really interesting in that she said if it goes 4 games, she thinks Griffin will win, but if it goes 5, she thinks IG will win.
I'll have to watch Tea of Legends to understand her comment, because I'm a little bit lost. We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
I think she doesn't trust Griffin's mental because they're still scarred from losing to KT.
Got it.
Back in 2018.
In fairness, they lost SKT in 4 games too, so who's to say that their mental isn't scarred? It gets to 4 games. Anyway. Didn't they? And they got 3-0 by SKT in spring as well, right?
Yeah, they got stomped by
if it gets to 3 games, maybe they lose that too.
IG 3-0s, and we're both just completely wrong.
I mean,
that would be the most IG thing.
All right. I mean, like I said, they should win this series. But I was still saying they won't. Anyway, either way I'm wrong, and either way I'm right. Moving on. FPX versus Fnatic.
Woo!
This one for me is actually maybe the easiest one to call.
I mean, I think it's gonna be Fnatic.
Yeah.
I think, especially if like one thing that I mean, it was illustrated most in Hillsong's. Wow, I'm so tired. I'm sorry. Hillsong's Pike game is that the Garen Yumi keeps him locked in lane, which is not actually a good thing. And I think one of the things that's going to be really important in this matchup is Hilly matching Crisp's roams, because Crisp does so freaking much for this team when he's outside of lane. And, FPX is a team that plays through their jungle support duo and then Joinby and how much he can affect their side lanes. And I think that FPX are, once again, as we talked about with the other Chinese teams, but I actually think that FPX are the most rigid in this. Yes, even more rigid than RNG, because RNG can play differently. And last year they were really good at 1-3-1. Is that within the parameters of how they want to play, they're going to shove, they're basically going to shove everything into how they specifically want to play as this team. And I think Fnatic will easily be able to counter that if they show us similar looks to what they had in the second round robin, with Hillsong being detached and matching Crisp's roams and stopping him from affecting the map as much, because that actually shuts down a lot of what FPX want to do. And that's going to be insanely important in this matchup. So despite the fact that people are going to be looking at Joinby versus Nemesis or Reckless versus LWX, I think that that's going to be the most important matchup to me and the one to watch out for, and also how Fnatic can kind of easily stop FPX from what they want to do.
So basically this world is just going to be me comparing FPX to European teams because I kept saying all through group stage that FPX and Splice are somewhat similar, and I actually think that that's mostly in mid to late game, right? But I think their early game and Fnatic's are really similar. I think Fnatic have a lot of the same kind of early game systems and ideas as the Chinese team, in the sense that they play super hard to really one side of the map, right? And that's then kind of have a sacrificial lamb on the other side. And they have like a hyper rolling roaming mid laner who loves like TF and all of this shit. So this is like a very kind of LPL style. But I think that so we're going to see like a lot of 3v3s in the mid lane because I think that the way to that FPX win games is Dunby fucks up his lane, Crisp and TM come and they help him get his first reset off. He still backs and comes back to lane with an item advantage, and they roam as 3 to whatever side of the map they want to go to. So the way that Fnatic win, right, and the way that they want to play the game is Hylissang gets priority in the bot lane, roams mid, and then resets, roams top with Braxa, like moves around and kind of as you could argue that Doinby is the second jungler for FPX, and then Hylissang is basically the second jungler for Fnatic in a lot of ways. And then they have like very similar styles with some subtle differences, but I think that one of the subtle differences that isn't so subtle is that Nemesis can actually lane. So if they match them 3v3 and can make it more of a 1v1 or whatever, then Nemesis should be able to secure the advantage. So I think that that's going to be key to the success of Fnatic, and this is why I think Fnatic win. I can think of situations where either team wins. I actually kind of, in my head, this matchup plays out in such a way that FPX usually are really bad in game 1.
Yes. Oh my god. Their drafting and their read on the game in game 1s of best of 5s
of best of 5s or of kind of new patches or anything like that. Yeah. Their game 1s are usually pretty bad under certain circumstance changes. So I can see them losing that for some reason. Maybe Gimgoon horrifically misplays his lane like he did in JDG. Maybe the enemy team has Renekton and Elise and actually properly counters mid jungle game 1, and then Doinby just, or the team just falls apart and doesn't do anything. And then they're usually pretty good at adapting game 2, so I see them winning game 2. But their range of being able to adapt, because as you said, they fit everything into kind of one fixed
regardless
package.
Of whether it's gonna fit, they're gonna cram it in there.
Their range of adaptation is pretty limited. So if Fnatic like counter and adapt in the third game and win the third game, so the third game is going to be the most important game. If Fnatic win the third game, then they just win the fourth game. I think that's how it's going to play out. So yeah, I think the third game is going to be the most pivotal and the most important, and I think that because of both of FPX's lack of range of adaptation, the general like poor laning that they have in isolated situations, plus Fnatic's like ability to actually match jungle support, make this kind of Fnatic favored. But there are ways in which both can win, and I think I outlined like the win conditions on both sides. So I think it's a really interesting interaction, especially in the early game. I think the longer the game goes out, Fnatic's ability to control and extend on the map is better. So FPX will just kind of like almost NARAM at you. So there you go.
Yeah. I also have Fnatic. I think this could go all 5 games just because I don't think Fnatic are without making mistakes early, and I think that FPX can capitalize on those. So even though I think it's Fnatic favored for the reasons that you said, I actually have this being like, I keep saying messy, but like I think it's going to be the most back and forth series from game to game, I guess. Even though I have more faith in Fnatic winning this matchup than I do I feel a lot better about Fnatic's chances against FPX than I do when what I was talking about with IG Griffin, right? Where it's like IG are such a unpredictable team that they should win, but we can't rely on them to win, and Griffin are more reliable. I feel a lot stronger about picking Fnatic here. I just think it could easily go 5 games because of mistakes that teams make.
All right, then. Let's talk about SKT Splice. And you might think that this is going to be a really fast discussion. But I think SKT have a lot of problems that they haven't been punished for. So there are ways, I think, to beat SKT. But the question is whether or not you have faith in Splice.
Yeah.
That is indeed the question. So,
I know, like, so it's really frustrating because if Splice could transition some of the early looks they have into a really solid mid-game control, I would be like, this matchup, like, might be Splice favored. But the problem is that the team that does that is not Splice. So, I think that's the reason why it's so difficult to pick Splice, is because not only do they like, their early game isn't always consistent, but I do think they have the capability to set an early game plan and execute it at a really high level, regardless of their mid-game mistakes. I think that's like a truth about Splice. And I think that still matches up well against SKT, despite moves and changes SKT have made to try to adapt. Honestly, they've looked better than I thought they would, and it's not that I was like super down on them, but that was like they have these early game these massive early game holes that can definitely be exploited by other teams. And I think SKT have shown that they're at least trying. I think the main issue that I have with Splice is that I don't think this is a team that isn't necessarily aware of their problems, but maybe they're unaware of how to fix them because they've been having the same problems for a really long time. And so that is, not only do I still actually have SKT as a tournament favorite, so at this point I'm probably a little bit higher on them than you are. But that's why it's so hard for me to pick Splice in this matchup, is actually just because I can't rely on the fact that they will be able to take this week and really make marked improvements in making sure that their early game plan is one that they can execute at a really high level very consistently. And then 2, that when they're pushed off course or when they have to transition to a mid game, that they don't suddenly look like they don't know what to do. Because that's another issue with Splice, I think, is that when they're pushed in a direction that they weren't expecting, their reaction is a bit slow in terms of how what they like are supposed to do next. And I know you've talked at length about their mid-game issues. So I don't know if you want to bring those up again, but like in a perfect world where Splice were executing more consistently, I'd say this is actually going to be a super close matchup.
So I think Splice have to force to get almost any objective, and that includes vision. That includes anything in the early game, and I think that's like their biggest early game, mid game, late game, whatever. And I think that's their biggest problem, is it makes them like extremely vulnerable to. You probably are not at good items by 6 to 4s here. You don't have vision on your sides when you're sieging this tower because you're trying to force to get vision to siege before you can even siege the tower. So it's just really weird, skipping steps almost every turn. So I think that that's a really gigantic problem with Splice. And that's why I think that they're pretty susceptible to SKT's tendency to. I mean, SKT over group, honestly. I think that that's a criticism of a lot of teams that I've levied, but I do think that SKT, for being a team that can play macro pretty well, Khan kind of inside if he doesn't get mid prio, so that's why SKT has really good team fighting in the context of LCK, so that's why they do have a huge tendency to over group. So I think that kind of in that sense, Splice's weaknesses will play poorly if they don't get champions that spike in mid game and if they don't get an early game advantage. So I think that that's going to be a problem for them. I also think that I do think, however, that SKT have sort of predictable flaws, and I say predictable flaws because predictable doesn't necessarily always mean flaw, right? If you do something predictably, it's not good. And I think this is like it predictably it can still be good. You know, it just has to be something that's difficult to counter and something that's really perfected, etc., etc. Clid almost always just makes plays on cannon waves. So that means it's easy to track him. This behavior isn't necessarily bad, right? Because denying a cannon wave means you deny like a third of a normal wave. But almost always making plays on cannon waves means that the wave doesn't necessarily have to be set up properly. Circumstances can actually favor the other team if you're just kind of tracking and aware of what lane he wants to play around and you just set up a counter gank for cannon waves or anything of that nature. I think it's pretty... Obviously, cannon waves are like every third wave in the early game, every second wave is later on, things like that. So it's not that predictable, but just kind of being aware of this kind of tendency is pretty valuable, I think. Also, I think usually he doesn't make a lot of plays around mid lane. They pivot, they function really well off of mid jungle, but they don't usually make these kinds of plays with effort. Effort doesn't run very much. And they usually don't make plays until after Faker's first reset. So if you're making an earlier play with Narskar and Xerxes before first reset on mid, then that can work very well for you as well. Those can be ways to get advantages. So there are definitely ways for Splice to win this. But I do think that some of their weakness actually plays really well against SK. Really poorly for them against SKT's kind of issues. So I wouldn't say that Splice are the best team to win here.
Well, also, like, I think when Splice do make a mistake, right, and they're punished for it, their next move is to always like, okay, we'll stall until late. But you know what team still does that really well?
Yeah.
SKT. And they're better at team fighting. So
yeah,
I also think that I wanted to bring that up too, is that like Splice's default when stuff goes wrong is to just be like, okay, we'll wait, we'll scale, it's fine. And that's worked for them, but it's not going to work for them against SKT.
Well, alright. Damwon versus G2. I actually find this one... I don't think Damwon win this. But I know a lot of people do. So what's your opinion?
I have G2 winning it.
Okay.
I think Damwon have... Like, I don't really think they've been tested all that much.
Did you see Mr. Keen's tweet about Group D?
No, I didn't.
It was this, like, the line was, everyone, I really wish all three teams from Group C could get out. And then the next line was Group D, what about us? And then there was a pause. And then it said everyone, and then nothing. And then it said everyone, I wish all three teams from Group C could get out.
Oh, no. It's so true. No.
So, yeah.
I think that Damwon have shown how they want to play. And I think it's also a bit rigid. I think Damwon... Previously, I've praised them a lot for being able to, like, being willing to adjust and adapt in draft in how they play at
they usually have to fuck up horrendously the first game though, so
yeah. Like, in terms of like being an international team, especially given how young this team is and how little experience they have at international events, I think that's actually a great sign for this team, that they're not, outside of like maybe Niggerty locking in kleptomancy every game, they're not like super tunnel vision on a lot of things, but I do think they have certain tendencies, and I think that those can be exploited by G2. Like the other option for Damwon, if they wanted to try to execute something kind of like what Griffin did against G2 and really heavily rely on global comps to overwhelm G2 and try to be in more places, but that's not really how it's not really what we've come to expect from them, right? Like that's not as much of how they want to play. And so I think that's a blueprint they could use, but I'm not sure if they'll use it. And I'm not sure if they will realize that that is a playstyle that they could employ against G2, if that makes sense. I think G2 just have so much more flexibility, and for as much as has been said about Damwon's laners, who like I thought not as highly of Showmaker as most people going into this event, and by that I mean even before World started, going into plans. I didn't really see a difference between him and a lot of mids just because of the way that he didn't adjust to certain things and how he was very hyper focused on like just the lane. I think he has improved throughout this tournament, but for as much as is said about Damwon's laners, I actually think that G2 is one of the teams that can stand up to them. They're also a lot more flexible than Damwon, and they have a lot more experience in adapting over a best of 5. And I think those are things that you definitely cannot underestimate when you're looking at a quarterfinals best of 5. Like as good as Damwon looked in groups, and then obviously in play-ins where they were playing teams that were significantly below their level, I think that this is going to be a really tough matchup for them, actually. And I think that G2 don't have to do much in terms of adjusting, in terms of like fixing a few mistakes that we saw from them in the second round robin, but like G2 have all the tools to win this. And a lot of the things that Damwon rely on, like their strong leaders, I think that G2 will be able to stand up to that quite naturally. And then they also have additional flexibility that Damwon just don't have yet.
So
You're doing that weird thing like Joinby did on stage. He's like, I don't think I played very well. I think I'm a bad player, or like whatever he said.
So I think that Damwon reminded me a lot of G2 last year. For as much as people make comparisons of them to IG, I think that they have similar strengths in that they all have to all in on their top side.
Actually, that is a really interesting comparison.
Nuclear's pool is about as exploitable as Garden's pool was, right? They just have different pools, right? So I think that that's something that you should be like. If you deny Kaisa, it's almost on. People expressed throughout group stage that the frustrations with no one's denying Nuclear's Kaisa, right? People expressed similar frustrations versus G2 when people didn't deny Hjarnen's Heimerdinger. So, obviously, also Nuclear is the more senior member of the Damwon team. Hjarnen, there are just so many comparisons. Nuclear and Hjarnen, basically same player. Anyway, I think that it's... So I feel like from that standpoint, G2 just shouldn't lose to them, right? Because G2 kind of have advanced past this sort of sloppy all-in on top side only style. I do think Wonder has been performing poorly, and Yankos has been performing somewhat poorly, but I think that if they are in a slightly better form than group stage, they can exploit the fact that, honestly, I'm gonna side with the shy here, but Nuguri Ngudi.
Nukudi, yeah.
There you go. Plays really, really flagrantly as if there is no jungler. And part of the reason he can do that, and part of the reason he gets away with it, even with the high death rate, is because I think Canyon is super good at splitting the map and kind of
Mm-hmm.
zoning opposition away from him. So he doesn't have to lane properly for this to work for him. And because I think, contrary to what a lot of people say, or like everyone's saying, who's the best jungler from LCK? Is it Clid or Tarzan? I actually think Canyon is the best jungler from LCK. If not now, he will be by next year for sure. Just he plays the map in such an interesting way with like far fewer, because on Damwon pretty consistently in draft, and to the point where they have 3 losing lanes. But he's able to do so much
Yep.
more with so little, that I think that his decisions all kind of have purpose. He really understands the identity of his team well and how to make them win in a bunch of different situations. So I think that Canyon is really interesting to me, and both Yankos and Wonder haven't performed that well, especially in the second week of group stage. And obviously that was just one day, but that's Damon's way through. I think otherwise G2 should just be kind of better. And I think you mentioned the point about globals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where G2 I don't think performed that well into globals. So that's also something that they can look for. We've seen Canyon bring out the Nocturne, I think, already at this
Mm-hmm.
tournament. So we'll see if that can work out for them. But I think overall it should be pretty G2 favored.
Yeah, I just think like even I didn't draw the comparison between Damwon is G2 last year, but I actually really like that. I just think that even if like say both teams come in and they both play at their best, G2 wins. If both teams come in and they both play like basically if both teams play at their level of whatever, so like both teams play at their lowest level, both
Their
teams play at
level
their
of
medium level,
whatever.
like yeah, like G2 always wins,
I
right?
just
Like
like that
because they
one. But
are
yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm very tired.
Your
And
level of
I
whatever.
have to stay up and like rewrite a feature, by the way, right after this. So
Okay.
that should be
Well,
interesting.
we'll let you go soon then. We're almost done.
No, it's all good. I enjoy doing this. But yeah, like I just think that it's basically going to take Damwon having like their best day in an international best of 5 where they're just a really young, inexperienced team, right? Like
Mhm.
we're talking about Canyon. This is his rookie year. And then we have G2. They would have to play like at a really low level consistently over this best of 5 in order to have Damwon win. I think just based on like cohesion, talent, experience, all that stuff.
But Emily,
So
all of Damwon's players are above caps in US solo queue.
that's cool. Good for them.
Actually, I don't think they are anymore. Anyway, he's competing with them. It's 3 versus
Wait,
1. It's
didn't
just
Caps
not
move
fair.
up into like second
I
or third
think
or
Canyon's first now.
yeah, Jug King, his old
Yeah.
ID.
Yeah. But Caps is second, and then you have Damwon players occupying the rest of the ranks. Anyway, it's very exciting to see.
Okay, he's 18. Never mind.
But I don't
But
know.
this
I
is
think
his rookie year.
overall these are some of the most interesting quarterfinals on paper we've ever had at Worlds. Even Splice versus
Yes.
SKT is pretty interesting. And I think that testament alone, unless it comes through that like all of the Korean brackets just 3-0 for some reason, I think that alone should still be a testament that there is more parity at this Worlds. So we'll see how it
No,
unfolds. Yeah.
I think this is shaping up to be the most even tournament we've had, which is actually really exciting because if you think about
Yeah, because if you eliminate 3 of the so-called major regions, then you finally get even competition.
Unlucky.
But yeah, there's a possibility if Edgy don't suck that we'll still have 3 regions, 3 regions represented in the semifinals, right? Which is pretty exciting too.
Yeah.
Anyway, good stuff. This has been making the rounds, and we'll let Emily go finish her feature. Thank you for
Woo!
watching. We're ready
Thank
to
you
be
so much, seriously.
wrong as usual. So
It's true.
let's go.
But you don't come for the show for us to be right.
You just
So
come
it's
for the
fine.
interesting discussions of hypothetical things that could happen in games that never end up occurring.
Yeah.
Like, for example, Cloud9 not just walking mid as 5 within a walk mid as 5 composition versus Griffin. That's all you had to do. Okay?
They were so scarred
not
from
difficult.
pulling licorice from Lane previously that they were like, we can't do this.
All right.
Anyway.
Good stuff.